All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. So everybody's here for the Leveraging TikTok for FranDev lead generation. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, this is the TikTok panel. If you're not here for the TikTok panel, then you're in the wrong room. No, I'm kidding. No, look, I'm super happy to be here with this group of panelists. There's been a lot of content over the course of this conference around mergers and acquisitions, transactions, private equity, strategics, platforms, and this is just a double click on all of that. We want this to be extremely interactive. I know this is a big room, but we want you guys to get your questions answered. That's what we're here for. Hopefully this is a continuation of the lunch panel yesterday and then the roundtables that everybody participated in yesterday afternoon. But just a quick round of introductions, and we'll kind of get into stuff. My name is John Goldisich. I'm with a firm called Lazard. Lazard is a global investment bank. We advise companies on mergers and acquisitions and raising capital. I am the leader of the franchising and multi-unit and consumer services practice. Lazard's been around for 180 years. We've been a part of some phenomenal franchise deals as big as Burger King and ServiceMaster. I've personally just joined Lazard and for 16 years have been an investment banker to franchise brands, College Hunks Hauling Junk, My Salon Suites, C2 Education, Pure Bar Fitness, many others. So I'm very proud to be able to moderate this panel with these panelists, and I'll let them introduce themselves. Just go in order.
Sure. Thanks, John. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah. Microphone. Yeah.
Thanks, John. Satya Panuru. I'm a general partner with NewSpring Franchise. NewSpring Franchise is one of the 5 private equity strategies within NewSpring Capital. We focus on investing in lower middle market, emerging branded, multi-unit consumer service companies. About half of our market is restaurant. The other half is a very wide variety of other consumer services, home services, pet services, personal care, et cetera. And where we really try to focus on our emerging brands where we think there's enough unit count to have proven the concept viability, the consumer value proposition, the franchisee value proposition, the unit economics, and where a founder is looking for a partner for not just capital, financial capital, but human capital as well to really accelerate growth. And that's where we focus. Nearly everything we do is partnering with the original founders of the brands. And so that's our focus. Generally, we're investing $5 to $15 million of equity per transaction.
Thanks for joining us here. I'm Phil Piro, a principal at Princeton Equity Group. We, like NewSpring, a private equity firm, we focus on high growth franchise and multi-unit companies, founder-owned. We're generally investing about $25 to $50 million of equity per deal, and I am on our investment team, so I am currently on the board of 4 franchise concepts. One is called Strickland Brothers, which is a quick lube business. The other is called 5 Star Franchising, which is home services business, which Scott Abbott to my right runs. The other is a medical spa business called Meds by 10. And then we've got a small yard greeting business called Card My Yard, which is kind of an interesting company. So a lot of different breadth and reach, and we obviously touch a lot of different end categories, but think of ourselves as business model specialists. And we're a very entrepreneurial firm. I grew up starting out in investment banking, similar to what John does now. Did that for a number of years, and then went and operated 3 businesses, one of which I founded. So have a little bit of perspective outside of just viewing the business as an Excel spreadsheet, which I think is important perspective. And as a result of that, work very, very closely with our founders on any kind of issue, problem, nice to have, need to have, that needs to be solved, from recruiting to reporting to strategy, et cetera. So thanks for joining us, and hopefully this is a good panel for you guys.
Can you hear me okay? Yeah. So Phil's been assigned at Princeton to be my handler. He makes sure that I don't say anything that is inappropriate on these stands. But no, in all honesty, it's been great working with Princeton. So Scott Abbott, one of the co-founders of 5 Star Painting, and we sold that business to Neighborly in 2015. We partnered with Princeton last year in I think it was June we closed. And then since then acquired, we're up to 6 home service brands now in the home services space. And yeah, happy to be here and answer any questions you may have.
Awesome, thanks guys. Look, as an audience of emerging franchisors, obviously the transaction, market is, top of mind with a lot of people. This panel is here to help, demystify some of that. Sometimes you can think of it as a pretty, overwhelming or intimidating type of a thing, and what we're here to do is help kind of, double click into that and help interpret some of that for you guys. So first question for the panelists, for Satya and Phil, is just kind of like, let's define what the kind of transaction continuum is. A lot of people say an exit or a transaction or a sale. Like what does that mean? Just walk through the multiple strategic alternatives that are out there that comprise what a transaction is.
Sure. Well, fortunately, over the years, the capital markets have become significantly more efficient, and there are quite a few opportunities for founders and owners of businesses to take on financial partners, and it really runs the gamut, as John just said. Everything from small minority equity investments with fairly limited controls and really passive investors, all the way up to 100% buyout transactions. And where along that continuum that a founder is looking to bring on a partner is really dependent upon what they're looking for and what stage they're at. And Phil just mentioned a little bit about his firm, and when I talked about my equity check, I'm generally writing $5 to $20 million equity. Phil talked about writing $25 to $50 million. Those are two completely different ballgames. And the types of companies that we're partnering with and the size of the companies that we're partnering with are more often than not going to be very different than the types of companies that Phil's going to be partnering with. It's really dependent upon what a founder wants. And I think that's where working with someone like John can really be helpful in navigating that process, because John and people like him know who the different people are that are the right people at that point and continuum. So
We're going to retire this one. Yeah, I think I think that's completely right. I mean, I think it depends exactly on what the founder or the owner of the business wants, right? In some cases, you have legacy owners that are looking for liquidity. They want, to get, some money out of the business, so you can kind of take them off, let's say, the ownership stack, and bring in someone new. You could do a small round for growth capital. All of that would go in the business to help kind of grow, get to the next target. Or you could just find yourself wanting to go retire in Florida, right, and sell 100%. And each transaction, I think, comes with different dynamics. 100% exit, right? The ability to kind of shape the legacy and the trajectory of the business is limited, because the investor is going to need to bring in a new management team. For a small growth round, right? It's not a lot of kind of strings attached on the control side, but a lot of, I think, push and momentum for growth and kind of a lot of maturation that the company has to go through typically at that point when they bring on an institutional sponsor. So it just completely depends on where the personal preference is for the founder and for the ownership.
Yeah, I mean, we tell all of our clients and all of the operators that we talk to, transactions are not a one-size-fits-all approach. You get a lot of questions like, "What's the best transaction? What should I do here?" it very much starts with what your objectives are, what your personal objectives are, what your career objectives are, what your liquidity objectives, your family objectives. And all of those are what kind of get factored into, all right, what's the right potential transaction for me? Is it a growth equity round? Is it a full strategic sale? Do I want to continue to be involved in this business? Do I want to start something new? But there's very much not a one size fits all approach. Scott, for you as the operator and an entrepreneur who's been involved in 2 transactions now, kind of talk about your first transaction selling to Neighborly, a strategic sale, and then what objectives led you to partner with Princeton.
Yeah, happy to do that. Can you hear me okay? Is this working? All right. I'm actually going to skip past those answers.
All right.
Because I got a better one. There we go. But yeah, we sold, just to come back to that, we did sell 5 Star Paint and Neighborly. I think what's important for most founders, especially where you're selling franchises, these are people who believe in you, trusted you, you care a lot about them, and so clearly, who you select as the group you're going to sell to is really, really an important decision. And when Chad Jones and I decided to sell the business, we knew that we wanted to find a company that had the values that we held, and Neighborly had that. And more importantly, Neighborly allowed us to roll in. So we didn't, we weren't selling out, we were selling in. And so we were blessed to be part of that ride with them for the next, it was about 7 years, I think, almost, before they sold the second time to KKR. But I thought what I would talk to is just one particular transaction that we did at 5 Star Franchising the last year that I think will highlight, a lot of important things for most founders or entrepreneurs who are in the business. Last year in July, we closed on a transaction with Gotcha Covered Blinds. And here's we had one of the founders who was, in his mid-70s looking to retire. The CEO and brand president had lots of room left to go and was not interested in getting out of the business yet. They were actually a customer of one of our brands called ProNexus, which is a customer experience solution, customer call center for home service brands. So I had known, his name is Paul, the brand president. I'd known Paul for years. I'd been to his conventions. I'd seen his franchisees. I could tell this was a really quality company. And I approached Paul and said, listen, we're forming this platform, and there's an opportunity for you to participate. And for him, he said, well, look, I still believe in the business. We have got lots of room to grow, and I need to have partners who can help me really focus on that growth. And so in that transaction, we bought out his co-founder, who is now retired in Florida. Hopefully he's okay. And we began focusing on how to run that business more efficiently. And and we saw this happen with 5 Star Painting when we sold to Neighborly as well. I mean, when you buy a company, you're buying because you believe in the future growth of that business. In his case, we tripled his profitability in a year. He's been moving about 8 units a month now the last couple of months. Incredible growth on franchise development, incredible growth in profitability, alignment and interest, and he rolled in part of his ownership. He rolled into the platform of 5 Star Franchising. So now he's participating on the growth of all the assets that we acquire. It really is this, and it was a perfect fit. Like culturally, and I'd known Paul for so long, I knew that he'd be a perfect fit within the organization. So for him, it was like, I'm doing what I've always been doing. I love what I'm doing, but I'm doing more of it, and I'm doing it with people I really love working with. And so I think that's kind of like the fairy tale ending, I think, of where things just kind of all line up. And it came from taking time we've known him for so long, to making sure that was a fit that existed, and then working together on creating some real value for each other. So
that's awesome. That's great. Switching gears just a little bit, talk a little bit about the transaction process, and this is just for the group. I talk to a lot of founders and entrepreneurs who, look, they're very proud of their business. They, but they don't have a full appreciation for, just what it takes to get a deal across the finish line. I tell a lot of people, there's 3 things that are certain in this world, or in my world. It's death, taxes, and diligence. You can't get around it. You can't get past it. You're not gonna not do it. It's gonna happen, and it's gonna be, very labor intensive. It's gonna tax yourself and your team. but it's necessary, and I've never had a founder, an entrepreneur, or a client who didn't learn something very beneficial about their business through the diligence process that they were able to then take and apply to their business for the better after the process. So talk a little bit about just, getting from, okay, we have a high-level deal parameter in mind. What does it take to get to the finish line?
So I'll use a real life example, which is probably a good way to do it. So we invested in Strickland Brothers 10-minute oil change in May of 2021. We had known about the business for a while. We reached out to Justin Strickland, the founder, a bunch of times, didn't return our call. Eventually got introduced through a warm introduction. And for Justin, I think there were two things that he really thought it was the right time for a partner. One was, and again, he was really optimizing, young guy, he was really optimizing for just kind of total value, right? So, he wanted to bring on a partner to attract great talent, and he wanted to bring on a partner to really kind of help him scale and make the right decisions. So that process, we did our outreach, we kind of got our initial call, we very quickly went down to visit him, typically the way we work is if there's an investment banker involved, this part's a lot easier. If there's not, we typically will do it ourselves, but we look at the financials, we kind of look at where other businesses may be valued, and then kind of put a framework for a deal together. In this case, it was buying just enough of the business to make us feel like we had, a control deal, right, which was important to us, but where he got a lot of the upside. There were employment agreements, there were all sorts of things, but what we did was we really flushed this out with him early on, over a meeting, over dinner, et cetera. So really taking the time in the deal process to lay out, how long do you want to be in the business, what are the objectives, what's the vision, getting that alignment super important, and then really working on the structure and all the elements of the deal to kind of fit behind that. And then from there, it's, we sign a letter of intent, right? That's kind of like the key step in the process. It's not binding, but it basically says, I'm going to do this, you're going to do this, and we're going to try and close the deal in 60 days, right? And there's usually an exclusivity provision in that. That's really important for both parties. One is it keeps, I think, the investor, makes you feel like you're comfortable to kind of spend the money, right? Because diligence is expensive. And for the founder, I think it keeps them focused, right? It would be very hard to have people kind of engaging in multiple conversations while you're trying to get a deal done. And then from there, it's really like a complete research report on the business, right? So the market, competitors, legal, franchise legal, review of all the agreements. It's a lot of data analysis, like what we call business diligence. So what do the unit economics look like? What's the opening schedule? What's the customer engagement? What's the brand, reputation? I mean, it's really comprehensive. It's brutal too. Like it is a brutal process to go to. It's brutal because what we do is we bug the founder for information for like 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and they have to get it all, and then they also have to run the business. If all you're doing is diligence, it's easy, relatively speaking, but if you run the business too, it's brutal. And so that's really, I think, the early stage of the process. There's usually consultants that are brought in to do a lot of the work, like specialists in their field. And then once the initial set of diligence is done, financial diligence, quality of earnings report, where they look at all the numbers and everything, once all of that's done, you then kind of move into stage 2, which is getting all of the documentation done. In many cases, you kind of dual track everything, but the documentation starts to really accelerate as you get closer to the closing. That's like negotiating the purchase agreement, negotiating all the employment agreements, negotiating, if there's debt involved, a loan agreement, which typically the founder's not involved in. Usually the private equity investor does that. But it's intense. And then around the closing, and if Justin was here, he would be laughing, it's what I call closing admin, right? So it's literally a 3-4 week period in some cases where you're literally waiting on consents, you're waiting on just every little piece of information that the lawyers need to tie off, that all the parties need to kind of get alignment on. And that process can be really nerve-wracking, right? I mean, you've dialed in on what the final amount of money you're going to get is. You're waiting for the wire. You're waiting for the closing day. It gets pushed usually like 5, 10, 15 times, not because of anything that anyone can do, but like in Justin's case, we had to go get consent from a multinational energy company we had a contract with to buy oil products, right? And it's like just floating around some weird bureaucracy with no one able to actually understand what was going on. So that stuff happens and it's tough, but you just have to really keep your head down. The good news of diligence is you can use a lot of that work to inform, like after you close the deal, where are the risks in the business, what do we need to focus on, how do we improve, et cetera, and so forth, because it's basically like going to get a complete hospital-grade physical, to use a weird analogy. But yeah, so that was kind of, broke it all down there for you.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything Phil just said in terms of the overall process. Maybe just a couple things to note. As I said at New Spring Franchise, we're typically we think of our investments as in partnerships with founders of businesses. And in the investments that we're coming into, the founders believe just as much in the upside opportunity and the growth of the business as we do. And what they're really looking for is that help to get them over that hump through that inflection point in the investment in the infrastructure and the human capital development of the business to help them grow. And so for us, that diligence process is as part of that hospital physical examination, it's also a chance for us to get aligned strategically around how we want to grow the business and where we want to invest, what the focus areas are, and how we can be helpful. In some ways, and one of the keys for our capital is the recruitment and attraction of human capital. And oftentimes at every one of our businesses, whether it was at Blow Blow Dry Bar, Duck Donut, Central Bark, it enabled those companies to attract talent that they otherwise may not have been able to. In fact, Blow Blow Dry Bar never had a franchise development lead at their company, and we introduced them to a handful of franchise development professionals during the diligence process. And so we really use that diligence process as a period to create strategic alignment with that founding team on how we want to grow the business collectively.
Yeah, so I think what you're hearing from Phil and Satya is that diligence is not just about uncovering a gotcha. It's not about eroding value. It's serving a mutual purpose of, yes, we have to check our boxes. We have to see, we have to uncover and investigate what drives this business, but it very much serves a strategic purpose around alignment, around what the next 100-day plan is, what the 5-year plan is, uncovering key data points and KPIs to further drive growth and value in the business. I mean, two points that I'd highlight is again, don't take diligence personally. When one of these guys sends you a 16-page data request list, they're doing it to everybody, and it's not personal to you. They're doing their job, and it's mutually beneficial for both parties. If you need help, raise your hand. Hopefully, you have advisors, a team, consultants to help you through that process. Always be in communication with your potential partner about what you have, what you don't have, and things of that nature. And then two, I can't stress enough, having quality data at your disposal, even at a very early stage, is incredibly important, and it drives value for your business. You may not think about it right now today when you're just starting to franchise or when you have less than 20 units or less than 20 territories, but invest in enterprise software, in technology, in a way to extract really credible data around the operations of your business and of your franchisees. Because what a partner wants to see and what an acquirer wants to see is how is this business gonna operate in the future? What's the future gonna look like? And the best way to be able to figure that out is through really high quality data. Whatever KPIs are around your business, whether it's customer inquiries to leads to conversions, product mix, day part, repeat customers, margin, those things. And every KPI is different for different companies. It's different from home services than it is from bricks and mortar. But it's something to certainly have at the top of your mind at this point in your stage. Scott, for you as a putting together the platform that you're putting together, kind of a two-part question. One is, what are some of the key KPIs, data points that you're looking at when you're evaluating potential brands that come under the 5-star umbrella? And now that you've been through a series of transactions and you're on the buy side now, what are some things that now that you wish you knew then?
Let me answer the question around what I wish I knew then, what I know now. We've gone through 3 sophisticated sell-side processes now, where we've had to go through due diligence colonoscopies, and it gets better over time. You get used to it, and I love doing it so much now. I'm making other people do it, which is even more fun. Share the love, totally. So first off, if I could talk to my younger self, having gone through these transactions, what do I do differently? And my advice to any entrepreneur or any founder who owns a company is, if you're planning on selling the business and that is on your mind, it's something that one day you plan on doing that, then I would act as such now. Like, thinking about your business and making sure it's done properly, tracking all your systems, your processes, make sure that every franchise sale is properly documented, put all your files, go ahead and create a virtual drive of all the documents everyone's going to want. Every single franchise agreement, every single employment agreement, every single vendor agreement, every agreement you have, rebate agreements, all your FDDs, all your receipt pages. Just go ahead and file them all now. Because one day, Phil's going to ask you for it. And when that happens, you want to be ready. So that would just kind of speed up the process. And then, what was your first question? I'm sorry.
Just around the data that you're looking
right.
at when you're evaluating brands.
I look at it as the same way a franchisee would look at it. Like, I want to know unit economics and validation. For me, those are probably the 2 most important things about any franchise concept, because EBITDA could be out of whack ultimately because the founder has hired too many people and they don't need that many people, or they're just spending money in areas and trying things out, or they haven't used an ad fund yet and they're spending stuff out of royalties. They could be doing things that weren't really efficient in the business, and you can fix that stuff, but you can't fix broken. Like, you can't fix the model doesn't work or the margins aren't right in the actual core asset, and it's really hard to fix validation, because when you do a transaction, every franchisee that just as part of that transaction just went through a very terrifying moment in their life. They're like, oh my gosh, I had a franchise agreement I've not looked at in 10 years. And now I'm going to wonder if they're going to pull some clause out in that agreement on me and use it against me. And so you spend so much energy and time just making sure that all the franchisees know that you're still aligned with their interests, you still want them to be successful, and you're actually going to be a better partner than they'd ever experienced, right? So if you walk into that with really poor validation, then franchise sales just fall apart. So those are the 2 things I look for the most.
That's worth the price of admission right there, guys. That's what we're here for. Really, really good stuff. You know, I said at the beginning of this that we wanted this to be interactive, and I've got, you know, a handful of other questions for the panel, but before I do, let's just open it up for questions. Anybody have any? Fire away. Ed. Okay.
Is there a minimum threshold number of units that you would really want to see in development, year plus, before you're willing to sit down and chat? You know, you're on the lower end of the investment scale. I would imagine there's a higher number for you, but where's that line where we?
Yeah, so I'm not going to answer your question, which is super frustrating. It depends.
You're welcome for giving me
Yeah, exactly. No, it depends. So it's really circumstantial, and I would say that we set criteria, right, in our firm, franchise focus. You know, here's like our equity check. We set that for two reasons. One is we need to stay focused, right, as investors, and then two, because we have investors who want to invest in a specific strategy, right? That's how kind of the up channel works, if you will. The dirty secret is that like we can bend the criteria, right? And so to answer your question in short, there is not a threshold. Would we look at a system with 5 units or 7 units? No. I would tell you that usually it's going to be like at the lowest, we've bent every criteria, like maybe 40 units, 30 units. But for us to really lean in on that, we'd have to see a few things. One is like developing, like selling 10, 15, 20 licenses a month, like just some sort of like abnormal development story. Leases signed on 30, 40, 50 new units in the next 6 to 9 months. So, because that really de-risks our ability, right? Like, if we're going to pay a huge price for a business, we want to feel like in a year, like we're not putting a ton of capital at risk, right? So having like leases signed, having a track record of execution of being able to open stores, that would be another. And then unit economics, I think, are huge. So some proof around that, more than just 10 units, right? 30 or 40 units kind of proves that out, different markets. And then some sort of category, right, that feels like there's actual like ability to lead and dominate that category. If you can align all those things, that's what would allow us to break down in terms of our criteria. But generally speaking, I'd say we're usually investing around 70 to 100 units. And that's because if you run the math on kind of where things are, like that kind of gets us at the bottom end of our size scale.
Yeah, I think, not surprisingly, we probably will invest at a slightly lower unit count, though not a whole lot. So in general, I'm going to give you a really wide range, which is almost to you. I'd say we are probably not going to start we're starting somewhere between 20 and 100 units. And that wide range is somewhat predicated also on the type of concept itself. What are the AUVs of that concept? We're generally not investing in businesses that are hemorrhaging money. We're investing in free cash flowing businesses and partnering with founders. And so the reason that unit count is sort of important to us is one of the things I said at the top, which is we're typically not investing in concepts where we're still trying to determine concept viability, consumer value proposition viability, maybe franchisee viability. I'll come to that in a second. And unit economics. We want to know those cold so that our capital is going to invest in just accelerating unit development and having a high degree of confidence around the acceleration of that unit development. Every once in a while, we'll, in a special circumstance, talk about a special circumstance. So earlier this year, we made an investment in a concept called Federal Donuts, which is a chicken and donut concept locally. It had 10 locations, which was pretty small, but we made a little bit of an exception because of the genesis and the foundation of that brand. It was a brand that was founded by Michael Solomonoff and Steve Cook, two James Beard award-winning chefs. Their restaurant, their flagship restaurant, Zahav, was named the best restaurant in America several years ago by the James Beard Foundation. And so you can imagine when a couple of chefs create a chicken and donut concept, how good the quality of that product is and what the consumer following and awareness is. And so we felt like this was extremely special. It's rare to find James Beard award-winning chefs move into the fast casual space. And so that was a highly differentiated and highly circumstantial event where we thought, and we already knew franchisees that were interested in taking out big, large territories on that. So we felt like we were highly confident in the ability. We're highly confident in the ability to scale that. That's probably a little bit more of a unique proposition. And so that's generally how we think about it. You know, on the higher end, when we invest. Hello? When we invested in Blow Blow Dry Bar, they had about 85 locations, you know, 15 to 20 locations in Canada, the rest here in the U.S. And we were very easily able to determine the unit economics, the portability, the scalability, the franchisee satisfaction, and knew that when we built out the franchise development infrastructure, that we'd be able to scale it. And in the first year of our investment, we added 47 new units.
I just want to add on to this for just a second. About 15 years ago was the very first time I came to an event like this. It was an IFA event, which is the governing kind of body of franchising, and totally green, had no idea what I was doing. I think it was 3 years into the business, had maybe 20 franchisees, and was at a round table with kind of like with a venture capital kind of group. And one of the individuals there, Craig Donaldson, became a very close friend and mentor for years, and still to this day is a close friend and mentor. And so what I would say is if you are thinking about one day selling your business and you're wondering if I could talk to someone, I will take your call and be happy to help anyone that's a founder or entrepreneur that owns a business of any category that's looking for just some advice or some support. Because I've been there, I know what that's like. And not just that, but I also know that this business is all about relationships. And so while we have a certain size we're looking for in home, and we only do home services, right? So we know what we want, we know what kind of size the business should be. The reality is that at some point, people grow up and they're going to have 100 franchisees, and that might be 4 years from now when Phil's already sold me for millions of dollars, and that's okay. And at that point, I'll still be around running a business looking to partner with the right entrepreneurs in home services. So happy to be helpful to anyone that's out there that's looking for some assistance.
Renee?
So you're in franchising. You're a franchisor? What was the category you're in? Food? Okay, great. So when you're selling a franchise, you're selling a franchisee to a franchisee, this idea that you can have services at the parent company that add a ton of value. Okay, now imagine you're a franchisor, limited resources, and you really need to have really top talent working on your business, but you can't afford it because you're not big enough yet. That's why you're a platform. A platform can take 6 franchisors, 10 franchisors in a home services category and just drive tons of value by having amazing talent in franchise development, in marketing, in finance, in IT, in accounting. Oh. Yeah. I'm sorry, there's so much noise in the back when the door opened, I couldn't hear that last part. Say it one more time.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that my question is more about how NewSpring is taking on food and services under their wings.
Okay, got it.
That you generally see like on all service or on all food. So that was more my question.
That's for Phil then.
Scott, you want to answer again?
Yeah, it's actually it's a really good question. When we think about our investment universe between food and non-food and sort of those wide variety of consumer service oriented businesses, fundamentally both of those categories we think are being driven by the same fundamental trends in the market, right? We think when we think about our investment universe, we think about it as about $1.5 trillion part of the economy, so big and large. And whether it's food, and food makes up about half of that, about $750–800 billion, and then the rest of it is all those variety services. But regardless of what it is, we think they're fundamentally being driven by the same tailwinds: consumer demographic tailwinds and consumer behavior tailwinds. On the consumer demographic side, you've got things like way more dual income households than there ever were before. Last year, Wharton graduated more women MBAs than male MBAs. That's driving a lot of significantly more cash-rich households, but time-poor households, which is leading to the outsource of all sorts of services, including both food and non-food. And so that's on the consumer demographic side. On the consumer behavior side, if you go talk to a millennial, they will try to go call someone to change their light bulb. Maybe not all, but a lot. And so that's creating the usage of creating a lot of tailwinds in all the markets that we're investing into. And so there's a lot of growth, lots of tailwinds. And the fundamental underwriting, we think, as well as the growth of these businesses, is fairly similar. Unit economic models, if it's real estate based, trying to understand that unit, the growth of those businesses. We've got businesses where we've brought in franchise development professionals into our service businesses that used to be great franchise development folks on the food side, and vice versa. So hopefully that was helpful.
Yes.
I have a follow-up question to the earlier question about unit size and number of units. When you're evaluating the viability of that concept, what sort of value or weight do you put on SNOs, on sold but not opens, in terms of as a percentage against the stores that are currently open? What sort of value or credit do you generally assign to SNOs?
All else being equal, we like a lot more than a lot less. You're good.
Next question.
Quite frankly, in a lot of the investments that we're making, because we're starting out a little bit smaller, we don't necessarily see a huge snow count, or in certain situations, almost no snow count, and that's okay for us. If the way we think about it is, if a founder had everything figured out, then quite frankly, they probably don't need us. Is really and there's probably a better partner. And we're coming into those situations where a founder doesn't have every single thing figured out, but they know they need help, and they know there are areas where they could use some assistance from someone like us. And so for us, it's not, look, all else being equal, like I said, it's great, but it's not the most important thing. We're far more interested in knowing that with the base of what they have, the unit economics are outstanding, the customer value proposition is really strong, and the franchisee value proposition and the franchisee satisfaction is really strong. If those three things are highlighted, we feel like we can figure the rest out.
Yeah, for us, it's pretty important when you get into a situation where the founder or the seller wants a very high value for the business, where we have to really kind of do a lot of work to get there, right? And so, but for us, we're going to look at, what is the track record of getting that open, timing, right? If it's like if it's a 100-unit kind of development agreement, kind of, SNO pipeline, like, and you've got 10-pack deals in there, I mean, that's not as valuable as having, 30 signed leases across, let's say, 25, 4-packs, right? So it's a little bit of the composition. All it does is inform when we think units will be open. Like it's not, we're not like running it through a black box, right? Like we're just looking at it and we're trying to figure out when will the unit be open, and then based on what the units that are open have done, how will that ramp up and when, and like, will it be 18 months when we feel like we didn't overpay for the business, or will it be 3 years where we feel like we didn't overpay for the business, right? Because at some point, but we want to, like, we if it's a great business, like, we want to overpay. Like, we want to get a deal done, right? We want to show a value that is going to get a seller excited and it's going to get people to actually do something. But for us, that's risky, right? And so for us, if we have that element de-risks it, and then we need to kind of know when it will get de-risked, right? Because you're inherently, like you are inherently overpaying for a business, just definitionally overpaying for a business, if you're just measuring it off of like today's profitability, today's open units, like you're overpaying for it, right? But we get comfortable doing that if they have things like, sold but unopened, and, real track record of growing, opening those up. So.
All right, so I want to be mindful of time. We have time for one more quick question and quick answer, and then we'll wrap up. Ed. Yeah.
Qualify for the quick answer. So can you speak to the quality of earnings process, but more importantly, how the seller's quality of earnings aligns with the buyer's quality of earnings?
So this is a great question, and I'll just to be transparent, right? Most sellers think that the buyer is going to use the quality of earnings to jam them, right? And they're going to jam them at the 11th hour. That's like that's like what everyone worries about, right? So I think, as Scott mentioned, having that, I would call it a maturity level, and it's not meant to be like pejorative or whatever, but it's more like just getting organized on the financial side early and having a handle on it, right? There's a reason it's important. If you do that, you'll be in good shape, and you'll have a good idea around your numbers. So just having a baseline understanding going into the process of what that number is going to shake out is really important if you're a seller. The process itself is pretty straightforward. You've got your P&L or your income statement. There's all these things that sit behind it. They go into the actual invoice level accounting, and they rebuild the financial statements, right? Based on that, they look at costs that maybe should or shouldn't exist, personal expenses that should or shouldn't exist, all these things that are trying to basically paint a picture of what will the business look like if a private equity owner, third-party owner had owned the business from day one, right? Some of it's accounting, some of it's one-time, some of it's things that are just erroneous that are in the numbers, right? And so the ultimate output of that is a report that is generated and discussed. We are pretty good about sharing that report, being very transparent about the report. We almost always have some sort of quality of earnings discussion. If it's 4 or 5% off where we thought we'd be, usually we just kind of call it a wash. If it's a lot and we need we give people the opportunity to dispute the work and whatever. So it's really about the tenor of that conversation and the tone and kind of the elements of it that I think are important. Because again, our goal is to put in an LOI what we will close on. We want to do it in 45 days. We want it to be straightforward. It's nerve-wracking for us as investment team members, and I know Satya will agree with this. When you get bad news during a deal process, it sucks. You've worked on it, you want to do it, it's really terrible. You're not excited to go back to someone and say, hey, we need to talk about the fact that there's 15% less earnings here than we thought there were. So that's the process. Usually takes 30 days. Most people will run that and then kind of use that as a little bit of a threshold to get to the second set of diligence. A lot of times they'll just kind of dual track it, but that's generally did that answer your question?
Yeah, well, the underlying question is, process, which is increasingly more likely, should they prepare their financials with that in mind internally?
Yeah, I mean, well, the good thing about most franchise businesses is that these aren't balance sheet businesses, right? And so it's not terribly difficult to decipher the quality of the earnings. For us, and I think for Phil, there are two components to it. One is when we've put down an investment structure, it's usually predicated, amongst other things, the current financial position of the business. And so there's a confirmatory element to it, right? Which is we've put down this investment structure based on this financial position. Is that financial position accurate or not? And like Phil said, if it's off by a little bit because of some things, if we put together an investment structure based on $1 million of EBITDA and there's actually $300,000 of EBITDA, that has significant implications both on the investment structure, but also we're also in the process of creating a strategic plan and strategic alignment on how to invest in the business. Well, now you've got 70% less free cash flow to invest in the business, which is probably going to change the amount of capital that the business needs. So there are a couple of different things. I think you're absolutely right. I think having having your accounting firm weigh in on if this business were to go through a quality of earnings process, what would that look like? And they should be able to help you out with those sorts of things.
So I want to thank the panelists. We're unfortunately out of time. I want to leave everybody with one thought, and it's going back to what Scott said earlier. Scott was extremely gracious in terms of his offer of pick up the phone, call him, he'll talk to you. I want to encourage all of you to just talk to the market. That's one of the great things about franchising is that it's a business model that applies to a lot of different industries. You're not in just the silo. Something that if you're a fitness concept, then there's something that works. There's a lot of that works with residential services and vice versa. And it's so don't think of yourself as just in your industry. You're in a business model, and those best practices, that's what we're here for. But then just it helps you to talk to people who've been through transactions, who can be a formal or an informal Sherpa, a mentor. It allows you to figure out how to use the language that they use, the terminology, and it builds reps. That just through osmosis even just helps you prepare for ultimately when you are ready for a transaction. So, thanks everybody.